Imagine trying to fall asleep in a world where winter feels endless. How did Viking families keep warm through nights spent inside cold, shadowy dwellings? Recent historical research has surprised many, revealing what nighttime life in early medieval Scandinavia truly looked like. Outside, a brutal snowstorm blasts across the landscape. Temperatures drop to levels few of us could tolerate, and everything is buried under white. Inside a longhouse, lit only by a faint glow from the central fire, dozens of people prepare to sleep on plain wooden platforms. There is no insulation, no heating system, no soft modern bedding, yet each morning they woke up ready to face another day. For the Vikings, nighttime warmth wasn't guaranteed comfort. It was a daily battle that they mastered through clever design, resourcefulness, and a strong community mindset. Their solutions were grounded in simple engineering, an intuitive understanding of heat, and a deep familiarity with the materials around them. The result? Homes that acted like primitive thermal machines, shielding entire families from life-threatening cold. Continue watching to discover the construction tricks and domestic habits that allowed them to rest safely while winter storms howled outside. The Longhouse, a cold climate survival engine. Most people imagine Viking longhouses as big, drafty barns. In reality, their design was the product of centuries of adaptation to freezing climates. Every structural choice, from the floor level to the roofing, served one purpose: hold onto heat. In Iceland and Greenland, longhouses were often partially sunk into the ground. This alone was a major advantage. The earth acted as natural insulation, reduced wind exposure, and helped stabilize indoor temperatures. The walls were their main thermal defense. Rather than relying on simple timber, the Vikings built enormous turf walls, sometimes thicker than a grown man's arm span. These sod blocks, cut from grassy wetlands, were stacked in dense layers. The interwoven roots held each block together, and countless tiny air pockets in the soil trapped warmth. In winter, a layer of snow piled on the exterior actually added more insulation, turning the home into an underground-like shelter. Over the rafters, they laid birch bark as waterproofing, then added multiple layers of turf. This created a roof that absorbed little heat and blocked strong winter winds. Placement also mattered. Longhouses were oriented so their narrow ends faced the prevailing winter gusts, presenting the smallest possible surface area to the wind. Inside, the layout was highly intentional. A long passage ran down the center with raised wooden platforms, called pallor, lining both sides. These were multi-purpose spaces for eating, working, and sleeping. Elevating sleepers above the floor kept them away from the coldest air, which settles low to the ground. Windows, as we think of them today, were essentially non-existent. Any hole in the wall meant losing warmth, so the only openings were tight-fitting doors and a smoke vent in the roof. Function took priority over beauty. Everything was designed to trap as much heat as possible. In many ways, a longhouse was less a home and more a communal shelter built for extreme winters. The long hearth, lifeline and hazard. At the center of every longhouse was its most important feature, an elongated fire trench known as the langeld, or long hearth. This wasn't a fireplace in the modern sense, but a shallow channel dug straight into the packed earth floor and lined neatly with flat stones. These stones helped maintain the hearth's shape and also absorbed heat throughout the day, releasing it slowly into the room. Instead of one small fire, the Vikings stretched the flames across much of the building's length, sometimes 10, 15, or even 20 meters. Because longhouses were narrow but extremely long, a typical round hearth couldn't warm both ends. The extended design ensured that every family space near the walls received at least some heat from the central strip of fire. The hearth served many roles at once. It functioned as a communal kitchen. Iron pots hung from overhead beams, simmered with soups and porridges, while bread baked on stones and meat roasted on spits set along the coals. It was also the main light source, helping people repair tools, craft goods, or weave long into the dark winter evenings. But above all, it was the building's only reliable source of warmth. Benches faced toward the fire, sleepers oriented their feet toward it, and wet clothing was hung above it to dry. Keeping the fire alive was a round-the-clock responsibility, shared by the entire household. If the flames ever died out completely during winter, it could be life-threatening. To keep the embers alive, someone, often women or enslaved workers, stayed alert to tend the coals. At night, glowing embers were buried under ash so they would smolder until morning. With a little kindling, the flames could be revived much faster than starting from scratch with flint and steel. Fuel, more precious than food. Wood was the primary fuel in forested regions, but gathering, cutting, and drying it required constant effort. It was so valuable that an abundant fire was considered a luxury. Families rationed fuel carefully, feeding the hearth only as much as necessary to keep temperatures survivable. A house filled with smoke. For all its benefits, the hearth introduced a severe problem: smoke. With no chimney and only a small roof vent, the longhouse filled perpetually with haze. Archaeologists have found thick deposits of soot, coating ancient beams and interior surfaces, sometimes penetrating centimeters into the wood. Modern air quality standards would deem the interior unbreathable. Smoke particles, carcinogens, and carbon monoxide saturated the space from morning to night. Walls became greasy and blackened, clothes absorbed the fumes, and people's skin carried the scent of lingering smoke. Women and children, who spent more time near the fire, suffered the most. Skeletal remains from the era reveal widespread chronic respiratory illnesses, eye irritation, and bronchial damage. Still, the Vikings accepted the risk. The alternative, a cold house, was far deadlier. Inside the longhouse, the atmosphere was dim, heavy, and smoky, creating a unique environment that was both oppressive and intensely lived in. Yet, despite these conditions, the hearth remained the household's heart, and without it, survival was impossible. Stone heating, a 1,000-year-old radiant floor. A central fire could warm the air, but it didn't naturally heat the sleeping platforms pressed against the cold outer walls. Lying down on chilled wood meant losing body heat rapidly, dangerous during harsh winters. To solve this, the Vikings developed a simple but brilliantly effective method based on thermal mass: heated stones. During the day, while the long hearth burned steadily, large flat stones were placed in or beside the fire to absorb heat. These weren't random rocks, but types chosen for their ability to hold warmth for hours. When evening approached, family members used wooden tongs or thick pieces of hide to pull the stones from the coals. These hot stones were then tucked under the sleeping platforms or into shallow pits beneath them. As they released heat slowly upward, they warmed the wooden boards and created a much more comfortable sleeping surface. Smaller, personal-sized stones were also heated and wrapped tightly in layers of wool or leather. These primitive hot water bottles radiated gentle warmth through the night. People placed them near their feet or held them close to their bodies to ease the initial chill of going to bed. Though it required effort and timing, this system provided localized heat exactly where it was needed most. Wool, the Vikings' most valuable resource. Beyond fire and stone, the material that truly sustained Norse communities through the cold was wool. More valuable than weapons or ornaments, wool was the backbone of their winter survival strategy. The sheep breeds of northern Europe produced a dual-layer fleece, a coarse, durable outer hair, tog, and a soft, insulating undercoat, thel. Both were coated in lanolin, a natural oil that made Viking wool remarkably water-resistant. Rain, melting snow, and indoor humidity simply rolled off it. Processing wool was a never-ending winter task. After shearing, families cleaned and sorted the fibers, combed them into long strands, and spun them into yarn using drop spindles. The coarse outer fibers became ropes, sails, and sturdy outer garments. The soft inner fibers were transformed into fabrics used for blankets, cloaks, and warm clothing. One of the most important textiles was vadmal, a thick, densely woven wool cloth that was further felted by soaking and beating until it became nearly windproof. Tough and exceptionally warm, vadmal became the standard currency in Iceland and was used to make everything from jackets to bedding. Wool filled almost every corner of their homes. It lined mattresses, stuffed pillows, sealed gaps in walls, and created the heavy blankets people slept under. Without it, northern life would have been nearly impossible. Layered bedding, a carefully designed heat-trapping system. A Viking bed wasn't just a wooden bench topped with a pelt. It was a multi-layered insulation system built to trap body heat with maximum efficiency. 1. Base layer. Onto the bare boards, they spread a thick layer of straw, dried moss, heather, or evergreen branches. This provided springy cushioning and, more importantly, created thousands of tiny air pockets, excellent for insulation. It also helped wick away moisture from the body. 2. Fur layer. Next came animal skins, usually placed with the leather side facing up and the fur side down. The leather acted as a wind-proof barrier, while the dense fur added more thermal buffering. 3. Wool layers. On top of the skins, families spread thick felted wool pads or several layers of vadmal. This formed the main mattress and protected sleepers from the cold radiating upward. 4. Top bedding. People covered themselves with warm woolen sheets or linen covers. Linen was preferred when cleanliness mattered, but wool provided superior insulation. 5. Cloaks and heavy blankets. As the final layer, sleepers pulled over their own cloaks, large rectangles of heavy wool. In extreme cold, multiple blankets were stacked to create layers of trapped air, forming a warm cocoon. Every layer, from straw to cloak, played a role in conserving the small amount of heat the human body produces. Instead of heating the whole house, the Vikings focused on insulating the individual sleeper. Night clothing, dressing for survival, not comfort. There is a modern misconception that medieval people slept unclothed. In Viking-age Scandinavia, this would have been extremely dangerous. Inside a winter longhouse, the temperature often hovered just above freezing, even with the hearth burning. Sleeping without proper layers would lead to hypothermia in a matter of hours. So before bed, people followed a strict routine of changing garments. Day clothes, damp with sweat, weather, and smoke, were removed and hung near the fire to dry overnight. Wearing moist clothing to bed was one of the quickest ways to lose heat, since wet fabric draws warmth away from the body far faster than air. For sleep, they put on a clean, dry, long undertunic made mostly of linen. Linen, after frequent washing and wear, was softer than wool and excellent at wicking moisture away from the skin. On especially cold nights, they added a second garment, a loose woolen tunic worn over the linen layer. This combination, linen underneath to stay dry, wool on top to hold warmth, functioned much like modern thermal layering systems. Head coverings, essential for keeping heat. In a significant portion of body heat escapes through the head. The Vikings understood this intuitively. In a longhouse where one's breath condensed in the air, sleeping bareheaded would undermine all other efforts to stay warm. People wore snug wool caps or used hoods attached to their outer tunics. These covered the ears and the back of the neck, sealing off some of the most vulnerable points for heat loss. It wasn't a fashion choice. It was a necessity for making it through the night. Shared warmth, the power of sleeping together. Heat shared is heat multiplied. The Viking longhouse was, by design, a communal space where entire families slept side by side on wide platforms. Privacy was rare and considered far less important than collective survival. Multiple bodies lying close together reduce the rate at which each person loses heat. Covering several people with one large fur blanket created a shared microclimate, far warmer than what a single person could achieve alone. Children, the elderly, and anyone sick or weakened were placed in the warmest central spots, surrounded by others who helped maintain their body temperature. Far from being uncomfortable or unusual, this arrangement was a normal, expected part of Viking life. Food as internal fuel, heating the body from within. Staying warm wasn't only an external effort. The Vikings relied on food to stoke their internal furnace. Their winter diet was extremely calorie-dense, focusing on protein and fat. Oily fish, salted meat, and animal fat provided slow-burning energy that kept body temperatures steady for hours. Carbohydrates, like barley or rye porridge and hearty root vegetables, supplied quick energy for work and movement during cold days. The evening meal was especially important. Before bed, people ate hot, hearty dishes, thick soups, warm grains, or stews. This served two crucial purposes. The heat of the food warmed the body directly, and digestion itself generated warmth. Warm drinks, herbal infusions, or heated low-alcohol ale added even more internal heat, helping people stay warm through the first, coldest hours of the night. Endless night, coping with winter darkness. Scandinavian winters weren't only bitterly cold. Light itself nearly vanished. Weeks could pass with barely a glimpse of the sun. Inside the longhouse, the dim glow of the hearth had to serve as both warmth and light. Evenings became a time of quiet tasks. Men mended equipment or carved wood. Women spun yarn or wove cloth. Children listened as elders told stories. In these long hours, the oral traditions that would one day become the famous sagas were kept alive. Shared storytelling and ritual gave people emotional resilience. In the face of unending darkness, the sense of belonging, being part of a unified household, was itself a form of protection. Nightly rituals, preparing the house for sleep. Going to bed wasn't a casual act. Each night, everyone played a role in securing the longhouse. The fire attendants covered smoldering coals with ash to keep them alive until morning. Others positioned heated stones beneath the sleeping platforms. Doors were checked and sealed against drafts. Bedding was shaken out and layered to trap as much heat as possible. These repeated tasks offered reassurance. The fire would last, the roof would hold, and the night could be met with confidence rather than fear. Conclusion: survival through ingenuity and community. For the Vikings, warmth was never taken for granted. Every detail of their lives, house construction, fire management, bedding, clothing, even social structure, was part of a finely tuned survival system. From thick turf walls and radiant stone heating to woolen textiles and shared blankets, they crafted a complex strategy to defend themselves from the brutal northern cold. But their most powerful resource was each other. In the dark heart of winter, the warmth of a shared fire and a shared bed made survival possible. Before you sail on, hit that subscribe button for the Viking saga. More untold legends, survival secrets, and Norse discoveries await you on the next raid.